Hello and welcome to another Excel video from Let's Excel at Finance. Today we're going to talk about data tables and how we should use them with some practical examples. If you're new to the channel and haven't already signed up for our newsletter or free bonus content, you can scan this QR code to get to the link. Also, we've got the link for the URL in the video description. So here's a typical example of a data set. We've got some row headers here and we've got some details. We've got details here for week 1, we've got some product and some quantity and some price information. We've also got some data here, some sample information for week 2. So typically you'll have some data like this and you want to summarize it. You probably will summarize it as a pivot table, and typically what will happen is you'll go in and create a pivot table like this with something like the week details and some quantities, something simple like this. Now when you then bring in week 2 data table in, so let's assume that this got sent to you via email, you bring this new data set in and you're going to be going back into your pivot table to refresh it and nothing happens. Now those of you that have done pivot tables before or been used to this type of scenario, it's very easy to fix. We go up here to the pivot table analyze tab, change the data source, and then we've got to go back and change it up to include the cell references for these new ranges, click OK, and now week 2 shows up. Now wouldn't it be great to be able to update for week 2 without having to go in and make those final changes? Imagine if your spreadsheet has got 10, 15, 20 pivot tables and charts all linking to this range, and every single one of them has got to be updated. Now some of you may have Excel macros that can do this as well, but I'm going to show you using a data table and formatting a data as a table, how that can be instantly updated. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to take this data set back out of our range here, and I'm going to go and format this table here, or this data range as a table. And then we're going to then leverage that data table in our analysis, and then we're going to update the range of data and see what then happens. So how do we format the data as a data table? Well, there's a couple of ways we can do it. On the Home tab, there's this Format as Table icon. We can click on here and we can choose a design of a table. The second way we can do that is the keyboard shortcut Control-T brings up this dialog box, and we can click on the range, and then we can click on it has headers and OK, and it will format it as the default color scheme. Now once you're inside of here, there's a couple of ways that you can notice that you're inside of a table and this is formatted as a table. The first is when you click on a cell within inside of the data table, you see this table design ribbon appear. If we click off of the table, notice that that disappears. When we click back inside it again, it appears. The second thing is the formatting. Typically most tables are not formatted like this. Again, these are linked to these themes that are here. You can customize these themes and you can set a default as well, but we'll talk about those in a separate video. The third thing is you'll notice right at the bottom here, you'll see, and I'll just zoom in just for a second, you'll see this little tiny icon. Notice that when my cursor goes over that corner, you can see that it changes the icon. That allows us to drag down and across, even move up records, to ensure that we have the range selecting all of the cells and the rows and the columns that we want it to cover. Now once you've got the data inside of this table, you can do a few things on this design table where we can do some renaming of the table. So here I'm just going to call this order details. Now I'm going to summarize this table within a pivot table. So I can do this from clicking on this table design tab or going to the insert and then pivot table. Insert pivot table. Now notice here, my table now no longer refers to a range. So when I did the first example, it referred to the range of cells here, but because this is formatted as a table, which is a databasing type of activity, it's going to use the name of that table. Now when I then go and create a pivot table here, on the face of it, it's going to look exactly the same as what I had before. I've got the week detail in here, and I've got my rows in here, and then my values here. But look what happens when I now bring in the new data set. When I press enter here and I bring my new records in, notice what happens. The format got copied down. I didn't drag that down. I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to go back into any memory. I just pasted the new data set in. So now when I come to my pivot table, let's see what happens. If I now right click and do refresh, it automatically updates to bring in week 2. If I want to bring in week 3, let me just hide these just for a second and make this a little bit easier to see here. Let me bring in week 3 and I'll put in a quantity of 1,000 and I'll just use this record just for now. And let me come back in and refresh. Week 3 automatically appears. So the table changes dynamically as we add more data. The other thing what happens is if we add a new context, so let's just put extended revenue. And here we're going to add a new column. We're going to do quantity times the price. Now because we're in a data table, a couple of things happen, right? One, when we edited a new header, the range got moved across, the formatting got moved across, and we know that this little icon moved across here as well to indicate that now that's the range of our data table. When we did a formula in the cell inside of the table, we're now seeing these at and then the field header and then times the at and then the field header. Now the at indicates a header for a column. So when we're inside of data tables, we're no longer thinking about data in Excel as being cell references, A1, B1, etc. We're now looking at things as columns, and that's how main databases work. And so when we do this, it applies the formula all the way through the entire data range. Now the benefit of this is we get consistency and we get control. This is how big databases work. You know, your banking systems, your ERP systems in your company, things like that. And so you're going to get consistency in the way that the formulas work. There are some workarounds. We're not going to go through those today. We'll talk about those in another video. But typically, this is how your data is going to work inside of a data table. Now again, another value of this. Now let's go back to refresh our data set. Nothing really happens, but let's have a look at the field list. Without doing anything to our pivot tables, there's our extended revenue. Now we can bring in our extended revenue into our pivot table. We didn't have to adjust our pivot table at all. So let me show you another quick example of this. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a quick chart. I'm going to do an insert pivot table. I'm going to do another pivot table. I'm going to use the existing worksheet here. I'm going to link this in here. I'm going to grab our revenue and I'm going to put our weeks in as rows, and I'm going to change this to be a pivot chart. So I'm just going to have a quick pivot chart here, extended revenue. Let me just add a price in here, $1, and we'll refresh this just for demonstration purposes here. Let me bring this down and let me refresh. Okay, so we've got our data sets here. So now let's come to now do week 4. So week 4, we've got, type in week 4, we'll put in here $15 and 1,500 records, and we'll just call this for coffee just for now. So now what happens is, now if I go to the data set, I've got weeks 1, 2 and 3. I've got weeks 1, 2 and 3. Let me change this to be for quantities just so we can see all the things update here. So we've got 1, 2 and 3 weeks. This is quantities. 1, 2 and 3, this is revenue. Now we updated our data set. In one click we can go to data, we can click refresh all, and it updates automatically the quantities and automatically the revenue. These can be on different worksheets, these can be on different tabs. They can't be across different workbooks, but they can all be within inside here. We can have them formatted in different ways, but they're all linked into this table. We can also, if we want to remove data, so let's say if we wanted to remove the data, we'll delete those records. Notice this icon moved up, the formatting went away, and now we'll go to data, refresh all, and week 3 and week 4 are automatically removed from everywhere that we link the data to that table. Hopefully you found this helpful. Thanks for watching. You can contact us here. Again, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter and the free bonus content. You can get that from the QR code here. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you on the next video.